The mining station Kepler 442 hung in the darkness like a dying star, its hull punctured in 17 places by Zephyrian plasma cannons. Commander Sarah Chun pressed her palm against the cracked viewport of the command center, watching debris from destroyed human ships drift past in the void. 3 months ago, this system had been humanity's most productive mining operation. Now it was a graveyard. "Ma'am, we're down to 47 survivors," reported Lieutenant Torres, his voice barely a whisper. The young officer's uniform was torn and stained with blood that wasn't his own. "Medical says we have maybe 6 days of life support left, assuming we keep the population center sealed." Sarah nodded grimly. 6 days. The Zephyrian Empire had been thorough in their assault. No human ship had escaped the system to carry word of the attack back to Earth. The nearest human colony was 12 light-years away, and their distress beacon had a maximum range of only 3 light-years. They were alone, forgotten, and dying slowly in the cold of space. The Zephyrians were a proud warrior race, tall and lean with blue-scaled skin that seemed to shimmer in artificial light. They had conquered 17 star systems in the past 50 years, enslaving or exterminating every species they encountered. Humanity had tried diplomacy first, sending ambassadors and trade delegations. The Zephyrians had sent back the ambassadors' heads in ornate boxes. "Status report on the mining equipment," Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer would be grim. "All fusion reactors are offline except the backup in Section C," Torres replied, checking his tablet. "The Zephyrians specifically targeted our power infrastructure. They wanted us alive, but helpless." He paused, swallowing hard. "Captain Martinez thinks they're planning to use us as slave labor in their mining operations." Sarah had known Captain Martinez for 15 years. He was a good man, a former merchant marine who had turned to asteroid mining when the corporate wars made shipping too dangerous. If Martinez thought the Zephyrians wanted slaves, he was probably right. The blue-scaled aliens had done the same thing on Proxima Centauri b, working the human colonists to death in their dilithium mines. The command center's main screen flickered to life, showing a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship that hung just outside the asteroid field. Admiral Kethvar appeared on screen, his reptilian features twisted into what humans had learned to recognize as a smile. 3 rows of sharp teeth gleamed in the bridge lighting of his vessel. "Human survivors," Kethvar spoke in accented standard English, his forked tongue flicking out between words. "Your resistance has been amusing, but pointless. In 2 of your days, I will board your pathetic station and claim you as property of the Zephyrian Empire. You will mine precious metals for our glory until your weak human bodies fail. This is mercy. I could simply destroy you now." The transmission cut out, leaving the command center in silence except for the steady hum of the failing life support systems. Sarah looked around at her remaining crew. Engineers, miners, a few security personnel who had survived the initial attack. None of them were soldiers. None of them had ever imagined they would die light years from Earth, forgotten by their own species. "Commander," whispered Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief medical officer. "The injured in Medical Bay 2 are asking if we've heard anything from Earth. From the Colonial Defense Force. They want to know if help is coming." Sarah met the doctor's eyes and saw her own despair reflected there. The Colonial Defense Force was spread thin across 43 systems, most of their ships committed to protecting the core worlds. Even if they had received a distress signal, which they hadn't, it would take weeks for any relief force to reach Kepler 442. They would be dead or enslaved long before then. "Tell them we're monitoring all frequencies," Sarah said quietly. "Tell them to rest and conserve their strength." It was a lie, but sometimes lies were kinder than truth. The next 36 hours passed in a haze of desperate activity. Engineering teams worked around the clock to restore power to the defensive systems, but the damage was too extensive. The mining lasers had been destroyed in the initial assault, and the station's point defense network was nothing but melted metal and shattered ceramics. Sarah found herself standing in Hydroponics Base 7, staring at the rows of vegetables that would never be harvested. The artificial sunlight felt warm on her face, a cruel reminder of the Earth she would never see again. She had grown up in the agricultural domes of Mars, where every plant was precious and every harvest celebrated. This bay could have fed 100 people for months, but what was the point now? "My wife is going to kill me," said a voice behind her. Sarah turned to see Chief Engineer Rodriguez approaching, his massive frame moving carefully between the growing beds. I promised her this would be my last tour. Said I'd be home for Maria's graduation from the academy. How old is Maria? Sarah asked, grateful for the distraction from her own dark thoughts. 19. Wants to be a starship engineer like her old man. Rodriguez smiled sadly. Smart kid. Smarter than me. She would have figured out how to fix our reactors by now. Sarah was about to respond when the command center's emergency klaxon began wailing throughout the station. The sound was so loud and sudden that several workers in the hydroponics bay dropped their tools and covered their ears. Sarah and Rodriguez exchanged glances before running toward the nearest transport tube. The command center was in chaos when they arrived. Lieutenant Torres was hunched over the sensor array, his face pale with shock. 3 other crew members stood behind him, staring at the main display with expressions of disbelief. Report, Sarah ordered, taking her position at the command console. Ma'am, we're picking up massive energy signatures at the edge of the system, Torres said, his voice shaking. Something just dropped out of hyperspace. Multiple contacts. Big ones. The main screen shifted to show the long-range sensor display. At first, Sarah saw nothing but the familiar dots representing the Zephyrian fleet. Then, the computer highlighted the new contacts, and her breath caught in her throat. 12 ships hung in space at the system's edge, their sleek hulls gleaming silver against the starfield. They were unlike anything in the Zephyrian fleet, built for speed and power rather than the crude brutality of alien engineering. Even at this distance, Sarah could see the distinctive configuration of human starship design. IFF signals? She asked, hardly daring to hope. Coming through now, ma'am, Torres reported. It's the legendary fleet. The command center fell silent. Every human in known space had heard stories of the legendary fleet, though most considered them just that, stories. Tales told in spacer bars about a secret armada that appeared whenever humanity faced its darkest hour. Ships that moved faster than anything in the galaxy, crewed by the best and brightest soldiers humanity had ever produced. That's impossible, Rodriguez whispered. The legendary fleet is a myth. A requiting poster fantasie. But the sensors didn't lie. 12 warships hung in the void where there had been empty space moments before, their energy signatures unlike anything in the human colonial defense force. The lead vessel was massive, easily 3 times the size of a standard dreadnought, its hull bristling with weapon systems that made the Zephyrian flagship look like a child's toy. A new transmission crackled through the communication array, and the main screen filled with the image of a woman in an unfamiliar uniform. She appeared to be in her 40s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a military bun, and eyes that seemed to glow with inner fire. Her uniform was black with silver trim, and the insignia on her collar was unlike anything in the standard Colonial Defense Force registry. This is Admiral Elena Thorne of the Terran Legendary Fleet, aboard the battleship Indomitable, the woman said, her voice carrying an authority that made every person in the command center stand straighter. Kepler, 442 Mining Station, please respond. We are here to render assistance. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the communication controls. For 3 months, she had prayed for rescue, while knowing none would come. Now, impossibly, help had arrived in the form of ships that weren't supposed to exist, commanded by officers she had never heard of. This is Commander Sarah Chun, Kepler, 442 Mining Station, she managed to say. Admiral, we have 47 survivors and limited life support. The Zephyrian fleet has us under siege. Admiral Thorne's expression didn't change, but something cold and dangerous flickered in her eyes. Understood, Commander. Maintain your position and prepare to receive evacuees from your station. The legendary fleet will handle the Zephyrian problem. The transmission cut out, leaving Sarah staring at a blank screen. Around her, the crew began talking in excited whispers, but she barely heard them. Outside the viewport, she could see the Zephyrian flagship beginning to move, its weapons powering up as it detected the new arrivals. Admiral Kethvar had made one crucial mistake. He had assumed that no one would come to rescue a forgotten mining station in the Outer Rim. He had assumed that humanity would abandon its people to save resources for more important battles. He was about to learn why that assumption would cost him everything. The battle for Kepler, 442, was about to begin, and the Zephyrians were facing an enemy they had never encountered before. Not the scattered ships of the Colonial Defense Force, spread thin across dozens of systems and forced to retreat in the face of superior numbers. They were facing the legendary fleet, and legends Sarah was beginning to understand did not accept defeat. All stations prepare for combat operations. Admiral Thorne's voice echoed through the mining station's communication systems. This is not a rescue mission. This is a reckoning. Through the viewport, Sarah watched the 12 silver ships begin to move with a grace and speed that defied physics as she understood it. The lead vessel, the Indomitable, was accelerating directly toward the Zephyrian flagship, its weapon systems charging with energy that made the very space around it shimmer. The miners and engineers around her watched in awe as humanity's legendary protectors prepared to remind the galaxy why humans were not to be underestimated. The rescue they had never expected had arrived, and it was more magnificent and terrifying than any of them had ever dared to dream. The war for human survival was about to take a dramatic turn, and the Zephyrian Empire was about to discover that some legends were very, very real. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bloodclaw, watching the approaching human vessels with a mixture of confusion and contempt. His tactical officers were chattering in their native tongue, their scaled hands dancing across holographic displays as they tried to make sense of the sensor readings. 12 ships, hissed his second-in-command, Commander Yithskal. Their energy signatures are unusual. The lead vessel appears to be larger than our dreadnoughts. Kethvar's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. In 50 years of conquest, he had never encountered human ships like these. The Colonial Defense Force vessels he had destroyed in previous campaigns were crude, boxy things that relied on brute force rather than elegant engineering. These ships moved with a fluid grace that reminded him uncomfortably of Zephyrian design philosophy. But their energy outputs were far beyond anything he had seen before. "How many ships do we have in the system?" he demanded. 47 vessels of various classes, Yithskal reported. "The humans are outnumbered nearly 4-1. This will be another easy victory for the Empire." But even as his subordinate spoke, Kethvar felt a nagging doubt in the back of his mind. Easy victories did not announce themselves with vessels that defied conventional sensor analysis. Easy victories did not come with admirals who spoke with the quiet confidence he had heard in the human female's voice. The lead human ship, the one called Indomitable, was now close enough for visual identification. Kethvar's breath caught in his throat as he saw it clearly for the first time. The vessel was enormous, easily 1,500 meters from bow to stern, its hull a seamless blend of curves and angles that seemed to shift and flow in the starlight. Weapon ports lined its flanks like the scales of some massive predator, and energy coursed along conduits that were clearly visible through transparent sections of the armor. "By the eternal void," whispered Commander Yithskal. "What kind of ship is that?" Before Kethvar could respond, alarms began wailing throughout the bridge. The tactical display lit up with warnings as the human fleet suddenly accelerated to speeds that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. The laws of physics demanded that ships that large could not maneuver with such agility, yet the evidence was right there on the sensors. Evasive maneuvers. Kethvar roared, but it was too late. The Indomitable opened fire. The weapons that emerged from a human flagship were unlike anything in the Zephyrian arsenal. Instead of the crude plasma bolts that his own ships used, these were precise beams of energy that seemed to bend space itself as they traveled. The first salvo struck 3 of his destroyers simultaneously, and Kethvar watched in horror as the ships simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not blown apart, they vanished as if they had never been there at all. "What weapon can do that?" Yithskal demanded, his voice cracking with fear. Kethvar had no answer. In the Zephyrian Empire's long history of conquest, they had encountered dozens of species with advanced technology. The crystalline beings of Altair Prime had weapons that could shatter planets. The machine intelligences of the Crab Nebula could manipulate matter at the atomic level. But none of them had ever simply deleted enemy ships from existence. The human fleet spread out in a perfect formation that his tactical computers couldn't identify from any known combat doctrine. Each ship moved independently, yet in perfect coordination with the others, as if they shared a single mind. Their weapons fired in carefully timed sequences that overwhelmed his ship's defensive systems through sheer precision rather than raw power. "All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship." Kethvar ordered desperately. "If we destroy their command vessel, the others may retreat." 44 Zephyrian warships turned their weapons toward the Indomitable, unleashing enough plasma fire to glass a small moon. The energy bolts converged on the human vessel in a brilliant display of destructive force that should have vaporized any ship in known space. The Indomitable emerged from the plasma storm completely unharmed. Its shields, if they could even be called shields, rippled with colors that had no names in any language Kethvar knew. The plasma bolts that struck the barrier were absorbed and redirected, some of them actually bouncing back to destroy the very ships that had fired them. The human flagship continued its advance without even slowing down. Impulsiva Kethvar Vispirit. No shield technology can deflect that much firepower. But the evidence was before his eyes. The human ships were not just superior to his fleet. They were operating on an entirely different level of technology. Their weapons deleted matter from existence. Their shields absorbed and redirected energy. Their engines allowed impossible maneuvers at impossible speeds. Who were these humans? Where had they come from? And why had the Zephyrian Empire never encountered them before? On the mining station, Sarah Chun watched the battle unfold with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The 12 ships of the legendary fleet moved through the Zephyrian formation like wolves among sheep, their weapons carving through enemy vessels with surgical precision. She had seen Colonial Defense Force ships in action before, and while they were competent, they relied on conventional tactics and conventional technology. This was something else entirely. "Commander," Lieutenant Torres called out, his voice filled with wonder. "I'm reading massive energy discharges from the human fleet, but the Zephyrian ships are just disappearing. How is that possible?" Sarah shook her head slowly. "I don't know, Lieutenant. I've never seen weapons like those before." On the main screen, the Indomitable was engaging Admiral Kethvar's flagship directly. The massive Zephyrian vessel, which had seemed so menacing when it first arrived in the system, now looked like a primitive toy compared to the sleek human warship. Plasma bolts from the Bloodclaw struck the Indomitable shields and simply vanished, absorbed into the barrier as if they had never existed. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Thorne," Torres reported. The main screen switched to show the interior of the Indomitable's bridge, and Sarah gasped at what she saw. The command center was vast, its walls lined with displays showing data streams that moved too fast for human eyes to follow. The crew moved with the fluid efficiency of people who had worked together for years, their hands dancing across control surfaces that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. Admiral Thorne stood at the center of it all, her silver hair gleaming under lights that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the ship's heartbeat. Her expression was calm, almost serene, as if the destruction of an entire enemy fleet was nothing more than routine maintenance. "Commander Chun," she said, her voice carrying easily over the sound of battle, "we're going to need you to evacuate your people to the emergency shelters. We're about to demonstrate why the Zephyrian Empire should have stayed in their own territory." "Admiral," Sarah managed to say, "your weapons, what are they? I've never seen technology like this before." A slight smile touched Admiral Thorne's lips. "Humanity has been busy while the galaxy wasn't watching, Commander. We learned long ago that conventional weapons weren't going to be enough to protect our people from threats like the Zephyrians. So we developed something better." The transmission cut out, leaving Sarah staring at a blank screen. Around her, the mining station's crew was already moving toward the emergency shelters, their faces filled with hope for the first time in months. But Sarah remained at her post, watching the battle through the viewport with fascination. The legendary fleet was systematically dismantling the Zephyrian Armada. Ships that had terrorized human colonies for decades were being eliminated with casual efficiency. The humans weren't even trying to capture enemy vessels or take prisoners. This wasn't a battle. It was an extermination. And then Sarah saw something that made her blood run cold. One of the human ships, a sleek cruiser designated as the Retribution, was moving toward a cluster of Zephyrian vessels that had tried to flee toward the edge of the system. As Sarah watched, the cruiser's hull began to change, its smooth surface rippling like liquid metal. Sections of the ship separated and reformed, creating new weapon systems that emerged from what had been empty space moments before. "My God," she whispered, "the ships are alive." It was the only explanation that made sense. The vessels of the legendary fleet weren't just advanced technology. They were some kind of synthetic life form, able to adapt and modify themselves in real time based on tactical requirements. No wonder they moved with such grace and coordination. No wonder their weapons were so precise and devastating. The Retribution opened fire on the fleeing Zephyrians with its newly formed weapons. Instead of the energy beams that the other ships used, this was something different, a wave of force that seemed to reach out and grab the enemy vessels, holding them in place while secondary systems drained their power cores. The Zephyrian ships went dark one by one, floating dead in space while their crews suffocated in the cold vacuum. Sarah realized that she was witnessing the end of the Zephyrian threat to humanity. Not a temporary victory or strategic withdrawal, but the complete annihilation of an enemy fleet that had seemed invincible just hours before. The legendary fleet wasn't here to rescue the mining station. They were here to send a message to the galaxy. Humanity was no longer the weak, scattered species that could be bullied by stronger civilizations. Something had changed, something fundamental, and the balance of power in this part of the galaxy was about to shift dramatically. Admiral Kethvar's flagship was the last enemy vessel still functional, its weapons exhausted and its shields failing. The Indomitable approached slowly, almost lazily, like a predator toying with wounded prey. Sarah could see the Zephyrian vessel's escape pods launching, carrying the survivors toward empty space in a desperate attempt to avoid capture. But there would be no mercy today. The legendary fleet had come to make a point, and that point required no witnesses. The escape pods were intercepted by smaller human vessels that Sarah hadn't even noticed before, fighters or gunships that had been hidden within the larger ships until now. One by one, the pods were captured by tractor beams and drawn into the holds of the human fleet. The Bloodclaw itself was the last to fall. As Sarah watched, the Indomitable extended some kind of energy field that enveloped the Zephyrian flagship completely. For a moment, both ships were hidden within a sphere of crackling energy that hurt to look at directly. When the field dissipated, the Bloodclaw was gone. Not destroyed, not reduced to debris. Simply gone, as if it had never existed at all. The battle for Kepler 442 was over. 47 Zephyrian warships had entered the system. None would leave. Sarah sank into her command chair, overwhelmed by what she had witnessed. The legendary fleet hung in space like silver angels, their hulls gleaming in the light of the distant star. They had arrived without warning, eliminated an entire enemy armada, and now they waited in perfect formation as if nothing significant had happened at all. "Commander," Lieutenant Torres said quietly, "Admiral Thorne is requesting permission to come aboard." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. In less than an hour, everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the galaxy had been turned upside down. The mining station had been saved, but she suspected that was the least important thing that had happened today. The real question was, who were these people, and where had they been when humanity needed them before? She was about to find out. The docking bay of Kepler 442 had seen better days. Debris from a Zephyrian attack still littered the deck, and several of the atmosphere barriers flickered with unstable energy fields that Chief Engineer Rodriguez had jury-rigged to keep the air from escaping into space. Sarah stood at the viewing port, watching the sleek shuttle from the Indomitable approach with movements that seemed too graceful for a machine. The shuttle was unlike any human vessel she had ever seen. Its hull was the same silver metal as the fleet's ships, but it seemed to flow and shift as it moved, adjusting its configuration for optimal atmospheric entry. No visible engines propelled it forward, yet it glided through space with perfect precision, settling onto the damaged deck as gently as a falling leaf. "Atmosphere is stable," Rodriguez reported from the engineering station. "Though not sure how much longer these barriers will hold." Sarah nodded absently, her attention focused on the shuttle's hatch as it cycled open. A ramp extended to the deck, and Admiral Elena Thorne stepped out, followed by two officers in the same black and silver uniforms. Up close, the Admiral was even more impressive than she had appeared on screen. She moved with the fluid confidence of someone who had never known defeat, and her eyes seemed to take in every detail of the damaged docking bay in a single glance. Behind her came a tall man with dark skin and lieutenant's insignia, carrying what looked like a medical kit, but with symbols that Sarah didn't recognize. The third figure was shorter, stocky, with the bearing of an engineer and devices attached to his belt that hummed with barely contained energy. "Commander Chun," Admiral Thorne said, extending her hand. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance. We would have arrived sooner, but we were dealing with a Zephyrian staging area in the Vega system." Sarah shook the offered hand, surprised by how normal it felt. She had half expected the Admiral to be some kind of enhanced human, but Her grip was warm and entirely human. "Admiral, I have to ask, where did you come from? The legendary fleet is supposed to be a myth." A slight smile crossed Thorne's features. "Myths have their purpose, Commander. They keep secrets that need to be kept and inspire hope when hope is needed most. May I introduce Lieutenant Commander Jackson Webb, our medical officer, and Chief Petty Officer Marcus Stone, engineering specialist." The medical officer stepped forward with a professional nod. "Commander, we're here to evaluate your wounded and determine what medical assistance you need. I understand you have limited supplies." 47 survivors, Sarah confirmed. 12 wounded for critical. Dr. Vasquez has been doing everything she can, but we lost most of our medical equipment in the attack. Chief Stone was already scanning the damaged docking bay with a device that projected holographic readings into the air. "Structural integrity is worse than it looks," he said in a gravelly voice. "This station should have collapsed days ago. Your engineering team has done impressive work keeping it together." "Rodriguez knows his business," Sarah agreed. "But, Admiral, I need to understand what just happened out there. Your ships, the weapons they used. I've never seen anything like it." Admiral Thorne nodded slowly. "Walk with me, Commander. There are things you need to know." They left the docking bay and walked through the mining station's corridors. The damage from the Zephyrian attack was evident everywhere. Blast marks on the walls, emergency lighting where the main systems had failed, the acrid smell of burned electronics that no amount of scrubbing had been able to eliminate. But Admiral Thorne seemed to see past the destruction to something else. "This is a well-designed station," she observed. "Independent power systems, redundant life support, multiple evacuation routes. Whoever built this understood that space is hostile and prepared accordingly." "Standard Colonial Development Corporation design," Sarah replied, "though we made some modifications over the years." "Admiral, about those weapons." Thorne stopped walking and turned to face her. "Commander, what do you know about humanity's early expansion into space?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "The standard history. Earth became overcrowded, we developed faster-than-light travel, began colonizing nearby systems. The Colonial Defense Force was established to protect settlements from hostile alien species." "That's the official version," Thorne agreed. "But it's not the complete truth. Humanity's expansion wasn't as smooth as the history books suggest. We encountered species that were older, stronger, more technologically advanced. The Zephyrians were just one of many threats that could have wiped us out in those early years." They continued walking, passing through sections of the station where Sarah's crew was working to restore damaged systems. The people they passed stared at Admiral Thorne with mixtures of awe and curiosity. Word of the fleet's impossible victory had spread quickly through the surviving population. "So what changed?" Sarah asked. "How do we go from barely surviving to whatever I saw out there?" Admiral Thorne was quiet for several moments, choosing her words carefully. "There was a project, classified at the highest levels. A group of Earth's best scientists, engineers, and military strategists working in secret to develop technologies that could ensure humanity's survival. Not just weapons and ships, but an entirely new approach to space combat and exploration." They reached the station's observation deck, where a large viewport offered a clear view of the legendary fleet hanging in space nearby. The 12 ships maintained perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with some unheard heartbeat. "Project Prometheus," Thorne continued, "named after the Titan who stole fire from the gods. The goal was to steal the secrets of advanced spacefaring civilizations and adapt them for human use. We studied wreckage from alien battles, infiltrated their communications networks, even captured a few enemy vessels intact for analysis." Sarah stared at the ships outside, beginning to understand. "You reverse-engineered alien technology." "More than that," Thorne corrected. "We improved it. Human creativity, human adaptability, human refusal to accept limitations. These things allowed us to take alien concepts and make them better. The ships you see out there represent centuries of hidden research and development." "Centuries?" Sarah turned to stare at the Admiral. "How old are you?" Another slight smile. "Old enough, Commander. The technologies we developed didn't just revolutionize our ships and weapons. They revolutionized us. Enhanced longevity, improved physical capabilities, expanded mental processing power. The officers and crew of the legendary fleet are no longer entirely human in the traditional sense." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What are you saying? We're what humanity needs to become to survive in a galaxy full of hostile civilizations, Thorne replied simply. We're the guardians, the protectors, the ones who ensure that no human colony ever faces extinction alone. The Zephyrians thought they were conquering a weak, scattered species. They discovered that humanity has teeth. Through the viewport, Sarah could see smaller ships launching from the fleet vessels. They moved toward the mining station with the same impossible grace as their mother ships, carrying what she assumed were medical supplies and repair equipment. Why reveal yourselves now? Sarah asked. Why not intervene earlier, before the Zephyrians could establish their empire? Admiral Thorne's expression grew serious. Because openly demonstrating our capabilities would have united every hostile species in the galaxy against humanity. The legendary fleet has been operating in secret for over 2 centuries, eliminating threats before they could reach human space, gathering intelligence, preparing for the day when secrecy would no longer be sufficient. And that day is now. The Zephyrians crossed a line when they began systematically targeting human civilians, Thorne replied. Their conquest of the Outer Rim colonies, the enslaving of captured populations, the complete destruction of settlements that refused to surrender. These actions demanded a response that could not be hidden or attributed to lucky breaks in conventional warfare. Lieutenant Commander Webb's voice crackled through Sarah's communicator. Commander Chun, please report to Medical Bay 2. Dr. Vasquez would like you to see something. Sarah and Admiral Thorne made their way through the station to the medical facilities, passing work crews from the legendary fleet who were already repairing damaged systems with equipment that seemed to fix itself as they watched. The efficiency was startling. What should have taken days of work was being completed in hours. Medical Bay 2 was a scene of quiet activity. Dr. Vasquez was working alongside Lieutenant Commander Webb, who had equipment that made the station's medical scanners look like stone tools by comparison. Patients who had been dying just hours before were sitting up, talking quietly, their wounds healing at a rate that defied medical science. Sarah, Dr. Vasquez said, looking up from a patient who had been comatose since the attack. You need to see this. Lieutenant Commander Webb's medical technology, it's beyond anything I've ever encountered. He's healing injuries that should have been fatal. Webb looked up from his work, his expression thoughtful. Dr. Vasquez, your medical knowledge is excellent. With proper equipment and training, you could be doing this yourself. Would you be interested in learning? The offer hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah could see the hunger in her friend's eyes, the desire to heal, to help, to access medical knowledge that could save countless lives. But she could also see the fear, the uncertainty about what such knowledge might cost. What would that involve? Sarah asked quietly. Admiral Thorne answered instead of Webb. The same choice that faces all of you, Commander. The choice to remain as you are, or to become something more. Humanity is at a crossroads. We can continue to struggle for survival against superior enemies, losing a little more ground each year until we're extinct. Or we can accept the changes necessary to not just survive, but thrive. Chief Stone emerged from one of the equipment bays, his scanner showing holographic displays of the station's infrastructure. The damage is extensive, but reparable. With our fabrication technology, we could have this facility back to full operational status within a week. Better than full status, actually. We could upgrade the power systems, improve the defensive capabilities, install communication arrays that would give you real-time contact with Earth. Sarah looked around the medical bay, watching her people receive care from technology that seemed like magic. She thought about the battle she had witnessed, the casual destruction of an enemy fleet that had terrorized human space for decades. She considered the choice that was being offered, to remain human as they currently were, or to evolve into something capable of protecting themselves and their species. What happens to the people who don't want to change? She asked. They continue to live their lives, Admiral Thorne replied. The legendary fleet protects all of humanity, not just those who choose enhancement. But, eventually, as more threats emerge, as hostile civilizations develop more advanced weapons, baseline humans will need more protection. The galaxy is becoming a more dangerous place. Sarah walked to the viewport and stared out at the alien stars. For 3 months, she had watched her people die slowly, knowing that no help would come. She had made peace with the idea that they would be forgotten, another footnote in humanity's struggle for survival. Now she was being offered not just rescue, but transformation. The chance to ensure that no human settlement would ever face extinction alone again. The opportunity to give her species the tools they needed to not just survive, but to claim their rightful place among the stars. But at what cost? What did it mean to no longer be entirely human? And could she make that choice not just for herself, but for the people under her command? How long do we have to decide, she asked. Admiral Thorne checked a device on her wrist that displayed symbols Sarah didn't recognize. The Zephyrian Empire will notice the loss of Admiral Kethvar's fleet within days. They'll send investigation fleets, then larger forces. If you're going to remain here, you'll need defenses that can handle whatever they send. And if we choose to evacuate, then we evacuate everyone to safer systems and maintain this facility as a forward observation post. Either way, Commander, your days of being alone and forgotten are over. Humanity takes care of its own. Sarah nodded slowly, the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. Around her, the survivors of Kepler 442 were experiencing hope for the first time in months. They were seeing their wounded healed, their station repaired, their enemy defeated so thoroughly that it seemed like a dream. But dreams, Sarah knew, always came with a price. And she was beginning to understand that the price of humanity's survival might be humanity itself. The conference room on Kepler 442 had been hastily repaired for the meeting. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls where blast damage had been patched with polymer sheets, and the holographic projector flickered occasionally as Chief Stone's people worked to stabilize the power grid. Sarah sat at the head of the table, looking at the faces of her senior staff and trying to read their expressions. Dr. Vasquez sat to her right, her medical scanner forgotten on the table as she stared at data readouts that Lieutenant Commander Webb had provided. The information showed genetic enhancement procedures that could eliminate hereditary diseases, extend human lifespan to centuries, and provide immunity to dozens of alien pathogens that plague human colonies. Chief Engineer Rodriguez was examining schematics for fusion reactors that were smaller, more efficient, and safer than anything currently in use by the Colonial Development Corporation. His weathered face showed the fascination of an engineer confronted with technology that made his life's work seem primitive by comparison. Lieutenant Torres had been studying tactical displays that showed the true scope of the legendary fleet's capabilities. Hidden bases throughout human space, sensor networks that monitored alien movement across dozens of systems, weapon platforms that could sterilize entire planets if necessary. The information painted a picture of a shadow organization with resources that dwarfed the official Colonial Defense Force. I need to know where everyone stands, Sarah said quietly. Admiral Thorne has given us a choice, but it's not one we can make individually. If we're going to accept enhancement, we do it together. If we're going to remain baseline human, we do it together. Dr. Vasquez spoke first. The medical applications alone could revolutionize healthcare throughout human space. We could eliminate genetic diseases, cure cancers that are currently fatal, provide treatments for injuries that would normally leave people disabled for life. She paused, looking down at her hands. But we'd also be changing the fundamental nature of human biology. We don't know what the long-term consequences might be. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. From an engineering standpoint, the technology they're offering would solve every infrastructure problem we've ever had. Power generation, life support, construction techniques. It's all decades ahead of what we're using now. But it also makes us dependent on them for maintenance and upgrades. Torres looked up from his tactical displays. The military advantages are obvious. We'd never again be at the mercy of hostile aliens like the Zephyrians. But we'd also be committing ourselves to a course of action that could lead to war with every other spacefaring civilization in the galaxy. Sarah nodded, understanding their concerns. What about the rest of the crew? Have you had a chance to discuss this with them? Most of them are willing to do whatever you decide, Commander, Torres replied. They trust your judgment, and they've seen what the legendary fleet can do. After months of thinking we were going to die out here, the idea of becoming powerful enough to protect ourselves is very appealing. But some have concerns. Dr. Vasquez answered this time. A few of the older crew members are worried about losing their humanity. They've seen what genetic enhancement programs did to some of the outer colonies, societies that became so modified they could no longer relate to baseline humans. The door to the conference room opened, and Admiral Thorne entered along with Chief Stone and another officer Sarah hadn't met before. The newcomer was a woman with pale skin and silver eyes, wearing the insignia of a captain. Something about her movements seemed slightly off, too precise, and controlled to be entirely natural. "Commander Chun," Admiral Thorne said, taking a seat across from Sarah. "I'd like you to meet Captain Lisa Nova, formerly of the merchant vessel Prosperity. She volunteered for the enhancement program 15 years ago after her ship was attacked by raiders in the Centauri system." Captain Nova smiled, and Sarah noticed that her teeth were slightly too white, too perfect. "Commander, I understand you have concerns about the enhancement process. I thought it might be helpful if you heard from someone who has been through it." "What was it like?" Sarah asked directly. "The transformation, I mean." Nova considered the question carefully. "Painful at first. The genetic modifications require your body to essentially rebuild itself at the cellular level. It takes about 3 weeks for the initial changes, and then months for your enhanced capabilities to fully develop. And after that, I'm stronger, faster, smarter than I was before. My reflexes are enhanced. My immune system can handle pathogens that would kill a baseline human, and my lifespan has been extended significantly." Nova paused. "I'm also more than I was before, in ways that are difficult to explain. More aware of my surroundings, more capable of processing complex information, more connected to the enhanced humans around me." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. "Connected how?" "We don't share thoughts or anything like that," Nova explained. "But we can sense each other's emotional states, coordinate our actions without verbal communication, work together with a precision that baseline humans find difficult to achieve." Torres looked uncomfortable. "That sounds like you're losing your individuality." "Not losing," Nova corrected. "Expanding. I'm still Lisa Nova. I still remember my childhood on Mars, my family, my dreams of exploring the galaxy. But I'm also part of something larger, something that gives my individual life more meaning and purpose." Chief Stone activated a holographic projector that filled the air above the table with images of human colonies. Some were thriving settlements with advanced technology and defensive systems. Others were smoking ruins where hostile aliens had left nothing but graves. "This is what's at stake," he said simply. "The colonies with enhanced populations and legendary fleet protection are expanding, building new settlements, pushing the boundaries of human space. The ones that rely on conventional colonial defense force protection are barely holding their own against alien threats." Sarah studied the images, noting the stark contrast between the two types of settlements. "How many people know about the legendary fleet's true nature?" "Fewer than 1,000 outside the organization itself," Admiral Thorne replied. "Most colonial government officials believe we're an elite unit with classified technology. They don't know about the enhancements or the true scope of our capabilities. And if we accept enhancement, we become part of this conspiracy." Thorne's expression grew serious. "You become part of humanity's survival plan, Commander. The galaxy is a hostile place, filled with civilizations that view humans as either threats to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. Conventional military forces and baseline human capabilities are no longer sufficient to protect our species." Rodriguez spoke up. "What happens to people who know about your organization but choose not to join it?" "They're relocated to secure facilities where they can live normal lives without compromising operational security," Chief Stone answered. "It's not imprisonment, but they can't return to their previous positions or contact anyone who might ask questions they can't answer." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Accepting enhancement meant joining a shadow organization that operated outside normal human government. Refusing enhancement meant exile from their previous lives. "It's not really a choice at all, is it?" Torres said bitterly. Captain Nova shook her head. "It's the most important choice you'll ever make, Lieutenant. But the alternative, watching humanity slowly lose ground to hostile aliens until we're extinct, isn't really acceptable either." Sarah stood and walked to the damaged viewport, looking out at the legendary fleet ships hanging in space like silver guardians. The battle she had witnessed seemed like a dream now, but the evidence was all around them. These people had capabilities that bordered on the miraculous technology that could transform human civilization. "Admiral," she said without turning around, "if we accept enhancement, what happens to the mining operation here?" "It becomes a forward base for monitoring Zephyrian activity," Thorne replied. "We'll upgrade the facilities, install better defenses, and staff it with enhanced personnel who can handle whatever threats emerge from this region of space." And if we refuse, then we evacuate everyone to safer systems and maintain the facility remotely. Either way, Kepler 442 continues to serve humanity's interests. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on her. She thought about her crew, people who had trusted her to keep them alive through the darkest months of their lives. She thought about her own dreams of exploring the galaxy, of being part of humanity's expansion into the stars. Most of all, she thought about the look in Admiral Kethvar's eyes when he had promised to enslave her people. The casual arrogance of a predator species that viewed humans as nothing more than useful animals. The certainty that no help would come, no rescue would arrive, no one would remember their names or mourn their passing. How long do we have to decide? She asked. The enhancement process needs to begin within 72 hours if we're going to complete it before Zephyrian reinforcements arrive, Admiral Thorne replied. After that, it becomes too dangerous to attempt the procedure in an active combat zone. Sarah turned back to face her senior staff. I want everyone to think about this carefully. Talk to your people, consider the implications, weigh the costs and benefits. We'll meet again in 24 hours for a final decision. As the meeting broke up and people filed out of the conference room, Dr. Vasquez lingered behind. Sarah, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that 3 months ago, we were ordinary people doing an ordinary job in what we thought was a safe part of space, Sarah replied. And then we discovered that the galaxy is more dangerous and humanity is more powerful than we ever imagined. That's not really an answer. Sarah smiled sadly. I know, but it's the only answer I have right now. She walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars, wondering if her decision would make her something more than human or something less. Either way, she was beginning to understand that the person who had commanded this mining station would not be the same person who left it. The transformation had already begun, whether she chose enhancement or not. The only question was what form that transformation would take. Sarah stood alone in her quarters, staring at the small photograph she kept on her desk. It showed her parents standing in front of their farm on Mars, the red soil stretching out behind them toward the distant horizon. They had been simple people, farmers who had answered humanity's call to terraform new worlds, building lives for themselves and their children among alien stars. They had died believing that humanity's future lay in peaceful expansion, in building communities that would preserve the best of human culture while adapting to the challenges of space. They had never imagined a galaxy where their daughter would have to choose between remaining human and becoming something else entirely. A soft chime indicated someone at her door. Come in, she called. Chief Engineer Rodriguez entered, looking older than she had ever seen him. His usually confident demeanor was replaced by uncertainty, and his hand shook slightly as he sat down across from her desk. Commander, I need to tell you something, he said quietly. About my daughter, Maria. Sarah waited, sensing that whatever he was about to say would be important. She's not in the academy like I told you, Rodriguez continued. She graduated 3 years ago, top of her class in advanced starship engineering. The Colonial Defense Force offered her a position on their newest dreadnought, but she turned it down. Why? Rodriguez was quiet for several moments, struggling with words he had never expected to speak. She was recruited by a group that called itself the Prometheus Foundation. They told her she had exceptional potential, that they could offer her opportunities that weren't available anywhere else. I thought it was just another corporate research division. Understanding dawned on Sarah's face. She's one of them, one of the enhanced. I haven't seen her in over 2 years, Rodriguez said, his voice breaking slightly. She sends messages occasionally, but they're always vague. Says she's working on important projects that she can't discuss. Says she's helping to build a better future for humanity. Sarah leaned back in her chair, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The legendary fleet doesn't just recruit military personnel. They've been identifying talented individuals across all fields, engineers, scientists, medical professionals, building a complete society of enhanced humans. Maria was always special, Rodriguez said. Brilliant, dedicated, passionate about exploration and discovery. But in her last message, something was different. She talked about humanity's destiny among the stars, about the sacrifices necessary to ensure survival. It didn't sound like my little girl anymore. The conversation was interrupted by another chime. Lieutenant Torres entered without waiting for permission, his face flushed with excitement and concern. Commander, you need to see this, he said, activating a portable display unit. Long-range sensors are picking up massive hyperspace disturbances at the edge of the system. The Zephyrian reinforcements are arriving. The holographic display showed dozens of ships dropping out of hyperspace. Not just warships, but troop transport supply vessels and command ships. It was a full invasion fleet designed to occupy and hold territory rather than simply raid and retreat. How many ships? Sarah asked. Over 200 vessels, Torres replied, including at least 15 dreadnoughts and what looks like a planetary bombardment platform. If they're planning to take prisoners for slave labor, they're also prepared to exterminate the entire population if necessary. Rodriguez studied the tactical display with professional interest. That's enough firepower to glass every human settlement within 50 light years. They're not taking any chances this time. Sarah activated her communicator. Admiral Thorne, please report to the command center immediately. Thorne arrived within minutes, accompanied by Captain Nova and Chief Stone. They studied the sensor readings with expressions of grim satisfaction rather than concern. Right on schedule, Thorne observed. The Zephyrian Empire's response to the loss of Admiral Kethvar's fleet is exactly what we predicted. They're committing significant resources to this system, which means we can eliminate a substantial portion of their military capability in a single engagement. Torres stared at her. You're planning to fight them? 200 ships against 12. Lieutenant, you're thinking in terms of conventional warfare, Captain Nova replied. The ships you see in that fleet represent outdated technology and tactical doctrine. They might as well be armed with stone knives and clubs. Chief Stone was already working at a control console, interfacing with systems that Sarah hadn't even known existed. Defensive platforms are coming online throughout the system. Sensor networks are tracking every enemy vessel. Automated weapon systems are targeting priority threats. Defensive platforms? Sarah asked. We never installed any defensive platforms. The legendary fleet has been preparing this system for months, Admiral Thorne explained. Hidden installations, cloaked weapon platforms, automated defense networks. Kepler 442 was never just a mining station. It was bait. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. You knew the Zephyrians would attack here. You let them. We needed them to commit significant forces to a location where we could control the engagement parameters, Thorne replied without apology. A mining station with minimal defenses was the perfect target to draw them into a trap. Rodriguez stood up slowly, his face pale with anger. You used us as bait. Let us think we were going to die, so the Zephyrians would feel confident enough to attack. Your sacrifice was necessary, Captain Nova said. And ultimately, no one died who didn't choose to die. We arrived exactly when we planned to arrive. Sarah felt sick. The months of desperation, watching her people slowly give up hope, making peace with death, it had all been orchestrated. They had never been forgotten or abandoned. They had been pawns in a larger game. The enhancement offer, she said quietly. That's part of the plan too, isn't it? You need us to accept transformation so we can't tell anyone what really happened here. Admiral Thorne nodded. The existence of our defensive network, the true scope of our capabilities, the strategic deception used to lure the Zephyrian fleet, these things must remain classified. Enhanced personnel can be trusted with such information. Baseline humans cannot. Torres looked around the command center, his expression betraying a mixture of anger and understanding. So our choice is really between joining your conspiracy or disappearing into some kind of protective custody. Your choice is between becoming part of humanity's future or remaining trapped in its past, Chief Stone corrected. Either way, you'll be protected and cared for. But only enhanced humans can participate in the decisions that will determine our species' survival. The tactical display updated, showing the Zephyrian fleet beginning to advance toward the inner system. Their formation was confident and aggressive, with the dreadnoughts taking point positions and the troop transports following behind. They clearly expected to overwhelm any resistance through sheer numbers. 30 minutes until they reach optimal engagement range, Torres reported automatically. Sarah watched the approaching fleet and thought about everything she had learned in the past day. Humanity had evolved beyond her recognition, developing capabilities that bordered on the miraculous while maintaining absolute secrecy about their true nature. The species she had grown up believing in, explorers and pioneers building peaceful communities among the stars, had become something harder, more pragmatic, more willing to sacrifice individuals for the greater good. Show me, she said suddenly. Admiral Thorne looked puzzled. Show you what, Commander? The enhancement process. I want to see exactly what you're asking us to become. Thorne exchanged glances with her subordinates before nodding. Very well. Chief Stone, initiate medical bay transformation. Stone touched several controls on his console, and the mining station around them began to change. Walls that Sarah had thought were solid metal shifted and reconfigured, revealing hidden chambers filled with equipment that seemed to pulse with its own life. The floor itself became transparent, showing vast spaces beneath the station that she had never known existed. The mining station was constructed around a hidden medical facility, Captain Nova explained. Everything you need for the enhancement process has been here all along. Through the transparent floor, Sarah could see medical pods that looked more like alien cocoons than human technology. Organic surfaces rippled with bioluminescent patterns, and fluid-filled chambers waited to receive human subjects for transformation. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The process takes 3 weeks, Admiral Thorne continued. Your consciousness remains active throughout, but your body is completely reconstructed at the genetic level. Enhanced strength, speed, intelligence, longevity, and immunity to most known pathogens. You'll also develop the ability to interface directly with our technology and coordinate your actions with other enhanced individuals. Dr. Vasquez had been silent throughout the conversation, but now she stepped forward. And if something goes wrong? If the process fails? The failure rate is less than 1%, Chief Stone replied. And even partial enhancement provides significant benefits. We've never lost anyone who chose to undergo the process. Rodriguez was staring at the hidden medical facility with professional fascination despite his anger. This technology, it's not human, is it? You've been using alien enhancement methods on human subjects. We've adapted and improved alien enhancement methods, Thorne corrected. The final result is something entirely new. Human creativity and determination enhanced by the best biological techniques from dozens of spacefaring civilizations. The tactical display chimed with an update. The Zephyrian fleet was now 15 minutes from optimal engagement range, and their communications were buzzing with confident discussions of conquest and plunder. They had no idea they were flying into the most sophisticated trap ever constructed by human intelligence. Sarah looked around at her senior staff, people who had trusted her through months of hopelessness, who were now looking to her for guidance in the face of an impossible choice. She thought about her parents on Mars, about the simple dreams of peaceful expansion that had driven humanity to the stars. She thought about Admiral Kethvar's casual arrogance and the hundreds of human colonies that had fallen to Zephyrian conquest. Most of all, she thought about the future, not just for herself and her crew, but for humanity as a whole. The galaxy was hostile, filled with predator species that viewed humans as prey. Conventional technology and baseline human capabilities were no longer sufficient for survival. I'll do it, she said quietly. I'll accept enhancement. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward immediately. If Sarah's doing it, so am I. The medical knowledge alone will allow me to save lives that would otherwise be lost. Rodriguez was quiet for several moments before nodding slowly. My daughter made this choice years ago. Maybe it's time I understood why. Torres looked around the group, then at the approaching Zephyrian fleet on the tactical display. I've spent my career protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. If this gives me better tools to do that job, then count me in. Admiral Thorne smiled for the first time since arriving at the station. Welcome to the future, Commander Chen. Welcome to humanity's real fleet. As the Zephyrian ships closed to engagement range, hidden weapon platforms throughout the Kepler 442 system came online. The mining station's transformation continued, revealing itself to be one of the most sophisticated military installations ever constructed by human engineering. Sarah Chun, who had expected to die forgotten and alone in the outer rim, was about to become something more than human in the service of humanity's survival. The choice had been difficult, but as she watched 200 Zephyrian warships advance toward their destruction, she knew it was the right one. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's legendary fleet was not a myth, and the enhanced humans who served aboard those ships would ensure that no human settlement would ever again face extinction without hope of rescue. The age of human expansion was ending. The age of human dominance was about to begin.